like to welcome you to Boy Meets Wellness, a podcast that discusses the complexities, celebrations, and challenges of building a wellness ritual as a BOI, a person who is born obviously incredible. You are now listening to Boy Meets Wellness with poet, motivational speaker, and wellness lover, Evolve Benton.
BOI, born obviously incredible, especially when you wear it pretty.
Hello, Boy Meets Wellness community. Thank you all for listening to the podcast. I want to invite you all to the paid Speaking from Home Masterclass I'm hosting this Monday. In this 75-minute masterclass, we will cover the following. Discover your unique speaking offer in order to prepare to deliver a powerful talk. Stop being undervalued and start being paid high speaking contracts. Learn how to book a $3,000 speaking engagement without leaving home, and use our Speaking for Profit roadmap to secure your first high-paid speaking contract. The masterclass is 75 minutes and only $47 per person. I would love to have you there if you're interested in elevating your speaking business. This week's episode features the amazing Carmalita Wilson. She is a writer, explorer, lover, and shit talker. Before we jump into the episode, let's jump into the Black Business and Wellness Tip of the Week. The Black Business of the Week that I would like to highlight is YAZI Clothing. The founder and creator of YAZI is Nalo. Through integrity and community building, Nalo believes YAZI Clothing could be the start of a whole new genre of clothing design, opening up more possibilities for what freedom could look like in fashion. You can shop YAZI by visiting www.yaziclothing.co. Our wellness tip of the week is to take an extended break from social media and screen time in general. I noticed the last couple of weeks I was starting to have a hard time sleeping through the night and also having migraines. I looked at my schedule and realized that due to my day job and business, I was spending a large amount of time on the screen. So my partner and I decided to cut social media and screens in general at a certain time at night. So far, I've noticed so much more energy and I am even sleeping better. So I invite you to find some time to just step away from the screen, social media. During that time, you can read a book or listen to some chill music. Just give your eyes and brain a rest. I hope this wellness tip supports your elevation and gives you more tools to live an incredible life. Now for our interview with Carmalita Wilson. Hello, world. Welcome to Boy Meets Wellness. Hella pumped about today's interview with Carmalita. Welcome to Boy Meets Wellness. Thank you so much for being here. Can you just check in with your name, right? And you just told me something interesting about your name, so please share that. Pronouns and what brings you joy.
Oh, all right. Let's see. Let me remember all of this. So I am only going by my first name, Carmalita, because my last name has changed so much in my life. I've always remained Carmalita regardless of the last name. So I've decided since last year to drop my last name on all publishing things moving forward, just because to me, it's the only name that matters. My pronouns are she, her, they, and that bitch. What brings me joy? Being able to be at peace while also doing things that I am highly entertained by and also happy doing while making money.
I love that end part, while making money, right? Because that's got to be a part of it.
Listen, you can't be afraid of money. And so it's I literally want to be paid to breathe. I feel like my breath is expensive. So pay me for it. Thanks.
So tell us about yourself. Where were you born? Where do you live now? I know you've lived around the world at this point, right? But a little bit of your trajectory to how you ended up where you are now.
So I was born in Columbus, Ohio, and I was raised in a really small town called Washington Courthouse, Ohio. And then I had a complete culture shock after high school, going from a predominantly white area to an HBCU where I thought I was finally going to get to, fit in with my peers and like, yay, Black people. No, for 4 years, I stuck out like a sore thumb. Nobody was natural, or very little people, I should say, were natural in 2008. So it was just like, I had to like really like ground into myself and who I was, because I grew up not fitting in, being the only Black girl, and then even being a Black girl amongst other Black folk that didn't quite fit in still. It was like, well, crap, I just have to really be solid in who I am. So I went to college in Ohio at an HBCU, Central State University. Big ups to the HBCUs out there. We're winning big. And then I went to LA afterward. So I spent about 6 years in Los Angeles. And then after choosing to leave my husband, I decided like, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to travel and explore and just do whatever it is that I want to do that particular day, year, month. So I took a trip across the country a couple summers ago and drove from LA to New York. And then I landed in Houston, Texas last fall. And I've been there ever since. That's me.
I love how you just kind of move within the world and do that. So, with such a flow, right? And it's like really consistently being fluid with like what you're calling in and what your truth is, So I know that for COVID, right? Like for so many people, like for me, I'm one of the people that's been still kind of stuck. How has it been for you? What wellness practices are you practicing at this time now that we're like being forced to kind of slow down a little bit?
I hate COVID, but love quarantine. I feel like people are finally tapping into what my life has been my whole life. Like I identify with being an ambivert, and I'm highly introverted and also highly extroverted. But the part of me that I've always been true to is like needing to rest and also like kind of take things as I need to. And so COVID has kind of forced a lot of people to sit and be still, like you said. And I've always forced myself to do that. Like I don't try to like push myself too hard or do too much because, with anxiety, it just was not like fun for me. So when I realized like, oh, one way that I can combat anxiety is just by slowing down. So I've always been one to like take naps and go extra on the green smoothies when I need to, or like go for a walk, or just like, I am so into like my personal wellness. I think it's an amazing thing that like on a global level, everyone is kind of like tapping into like a secret that I've always known is like, hey, you just need to slow down a bit. Like that's all. Like whatever issues you're going to have are going to be there tomorrow. And that's not to say that I don't get overwhelmed and like still kind of like overexert myself sometimes. But I think my constant is that of stillness. Like I'm queen napper. I rest as often as I can. So I think I've just been continuing it. Like COVID kind of didn't really change much for me. I worked at a nonprofit for about 8 months. And in Texas, like our COVID restrictions are like, have you seen the meme of the Cheeto that like holds the lock closed? Mm-hmm. That's Texas, like or Houston rather. Like they're like, these are COVID restrictions. And then it's like as strong as an eyelash. So I kind of like just stay in my apartment and like I'll go out from time to time. And like there are like some social distancing, like dining and bars and things like that. But I kind of just don't, add to the extra nonsense. Like I do travel, but I try to like, be as COVID friendly as I can. So I'm still out and about in the world. Like I think one thing about COVID is like it adds to like anxiety and like the mental health sickness part. And so I kind of just don't adhere to it. Like I'm not afraid, but I'm still very cautious. But yeah, I just kind of like, I keep going. I focus on, my body and the whole idea of like fluidity in my life. And when things aren't feeling, smooth, then I like, I adjust. So it's been cool for me. Like not much has changed, honestly.
Dope. So who are the people that hold you down? Like if you had a gratitude list, who are the people that are on there?
I would definitely say people and also dogs. So my little puppy dog for the last 7 years, this girl, literally, she's right by my side right now. She has literally been attached to my hip since I got her when she was 10 weeks old. So like having an emotional support animal through like some of the most difficult times of my adulthood, I would definitely say like my dog holds me down more than anyone else, because she kind of doesn't really have a choice because I take care of her. But I feel like she takes care of me just as much. But for sure, my brother, he is like my rock. He raised me damn near. And I feel like is still raising me sometimes as an adult. And then I also just have like a pretty solid ass group of family. Like my biological family is very small. I was adopted and am kind of like am only really close with my big brother. So it's like the friends that I've made over time have become my family. And so like I have a solid group of like, I could say a dozen people that I know at any given time will help me no matter what. Like that was one of the main reasons I was able to drive across the country in 5 days is because in every major city along the way that I stopped at, I had someone who was like, hey, crash on my pad. I'm going to make you dinner. You know, your dog is welcome, all these things. Like everywhere I've gone, I have someone there that's willing to like, you know, so I think because I have a good heart and I try to like hold people down, I feel like the people that are in my circle, I don't have like a top 5 or anything, but it's like my brother and then like my close homies and like I have hella mentors and like aunties and just like I have a solid ass group of people that like make up my ecosystem. So I think like my ecosystem as opposed to like a top 5 or anything.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I always say like, you know, folks always have amazing people behind them. We often see folks very individual, right? But there's always like a group holding us down and holding
Yeah,
it up for us. So
absolutely.
I met you in my MFA program and you are an amazing writer. I want you to know that. But one of the times when I really like start to like fall in love with your work was during your journey of really like figuring out who you were, traveling across the world, getting divorced, right? Like you were really putting your stories out there. And I really want to talk about like how did you begin to like shift in your writing and make your journal entries like more public, and what was that experience like for you?
Um, let's see how. I think probably the idea of social media or social media platforms making us believe we're more important than we actually are in a sense. It's like anybody can like has an open journal that like hundreds of people will read, right? And so when I realized that the things that I was saying, people were actually paying attention to. People would actually notice when I was gone online and be like, "Hey, where you been? I was looking forward to like whatever funny thing you said or like you just sharing yourself." Like I've always been kind of like an open book. And so I recognized like people a lot of times feel alone and they think that like no one is going through what I'm going through right now. And so when I realized like, wow, people like are kind of having very similar experiences, but like you said, people are also very like individually driven. And so they're thinking like no one else could possibly be having this particular experience. But it's like, as wild and crazy as one person's experience may be, another person will be like, oh my gosh, I've gone through that exact same thing. And so when I began sharing some things online, I would get this like outpouring of like, you need to blog, you need to write about this, write about it. And I'm like, I'm a writer, but you know, and so just with some encouragement, I'm like, well, I'm gonna like tap more into my essays and I'm gonna like tap more into my poetry and then share my poetry. And that was another thing that kind of like propelled me forward with my voice is open mic. Like I started doing, I don't even know if it's called performance poetry. I guess you're always performing if you're like in front of a crowd. I'm not sure, but Antioch
Spoken word, I guess they would call it.
Yeah, spoken word because I don't feel like I'm performing, but I'm, you know, sharing my, you know, my work. But Antioch, they forced me to, right? And so I was just kind of like, oh snap, I'm gonna have to read my stuff in front of people. And so when I did it and I felt very comfortable doing so, like regardless of if my hands were shaking or I was a little nervous, I still felt very at home speaking to people. So I was like, oh, this is amazing. And then when people resonate with that, I'm like, well, I want to share more because I want people to know that in any avenue of your life, you have someone, you know, that's gone through this. So the more I shared and got like feedback, and it's not always the best feedback. Like sometimes people can be, you know, rude or mean or, you know, whatever. And so I try not to focus on that. But then also I'm like, you know, stay humble or whatever. Not everyone's going to love you. But yeah, so I just got really comfortable in my own authenticity. And so I don't know how to like not be me. And so it's kind of like the more I try to like, let me clean it up some or be like this idea of something that I thought I was supposed to be, I felt it as a rejection to myself. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to continue to share. And so then it kind of like propelled into like my career and being like, well, you can share in this way, or here's a different platform, or here's another, like medium to share your story. Because I feel like every time I share something that I've experienced and someone else resonates with it, that's how we build community. And so then we can build a conversation and be like, wow, I've done that too, or I've experienced that also, especially around my divorce, where social media kept me married much longer than my heart did.
Oh, goodness. Put that quote on a t-shirt.
I absolutely will, because it's like, I was so young when I got married. So it's like, you're so young. And I was sharing, I've always been one to kind of like be an oversharer. Right. And so online, like my ex and I were like the, what is it, like portrait of like what young Black love is. We were this young couple from an HBCU, and I got married directly. Like I got married 6 months after I graduated. I was 22 and I didn't know shit, but
I didn't know it was that close to graduation.
6 months. He proposed to me a week after I graduated. And so everyone thought I was pregnant because they're like, why are you getting married so soon? But we were just kind of like, we love each other. Isn't that all you need? Wrong. You need a lot more that goes into like a lifetime partnership. But how would I have known that at 22? Like just the year prior, I was, legally able to drink alcohol. So it's like, I got married 6 months after I graduated. And then a few months after that, we moved to LA. So like so many big life things were happening. I like felt like that was the thing that was going to like, be my story. Like I'm this young wife. And it was also like a facade for all of my trauma. Like I got married, not because I was in love or like I felt like this man was the man for me, but I genuinely thought no one would love me because of all my crap. Like my childhood trauma, being adopted, all these things. I thought that my story is what carried me. And so I was like, here's a guy who's willing to marry me straight out of college. Once you meet that check mark, you have that accomplishment, then you can move on to something else, like your career or writing or whatever. But I thought I had to have that one thing to kind of make me like, here's the perfect person or whatever. Shortly after, I realized like we weren't compatible at all. Like we were the best of friends, but the worst of lovers. So like when you're sharing these things online, it becomes like, you kind of got to keep up with it because you're getting so much outpouring of love. It's like, oh, you guys are so young. And then people respect you. Like even as a professional nanny, I would put in my little like bios or whatever that I would send out to families, like until my husband and I are ready to have children, let me hang out with yours. Because what does that tell a family? It tells a family a couple of things. Yes, I'm young and I'm pretty, but I don't want your husband. And that's important. Because it's like, I was, young and in my 20s. And it's like, I know what I look like, not even being conceited, but I understand that like people are more attracted to people they find aesthetically pleasing, whether or not they work for them. So it's like husbands will have wandering eyes. And I'm like, let me introduce you to my husband so I can tell you not to start any shit with me. So I bring in this, big buff Black guy and they're like, hey, this is who I am. They're like, all right, we respect you. We know you're not about BS. So the wives can trust me. And then the husbands are not going to try anything for those who may have had an idea. So it was like, I kind of built this whole, like, I don't know, idea of what being, a young Black professional or like educated person looked like. And so for me, it was like, all right, get your master's, you already have the husband, and then you'll do the career. But then I found myself trying to live up to this expectation that I created, as opposed to like what it felt like to live in just my own like authenticity. And so the more I tried to like be that young married couple who was successful, the less I was myself. And I'm like, this sucks really bad because I can't afford to fail. Because for me, failure was not an option. Like I had to do really well in college. I had to do really well in grad school. I had to be the perfect wife, because if not, then all of the trauma that I had endured took me out. And so I like,
and you were failing your community too, right? Like it wasn't just on you. You're like people are admiring you. So if you do fail,
because I'm this young Black excellent woman who is like, I'm beating all the statistics. And if people are looking up to me, if I'm another, divorcee, or if I'm another, college dropout or baby mama or someone who is an addict, I have lived up to all the expectations, the negative expectations for me. So I was like, I refuse. I am going to like be over excellent. And that was not me. who I really am and my most authentic self is someone who fucks up and moves on. Like, oh, I can make a mistake. I can fail. I can get rejected. And there's beauty in all of it. Like perfection, first of all, doesn't exist. Second, the shoe doesn't fit for me. Some people are polished and put together, and I am just not that girl. I'm kind of like just the like flowing in the wind, kind of like, let me jump first, figure it out later. So when I began to realize that about myself, and then also realize with maturity, like, wait a minute, why did I get married? Oh, it was because of X, Y, and Z. So when I was like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. It was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make because my entire livelihood depended upon me being who I had like created myself to be. And so I was very, like depressed and had suicidal ideation at the time. Like grad school was really, really hard for me. So when I chose to leave my marriage, that was like one of the hardest decisions for me because I was like, it's either stay in this marriage or die. Like, and it sounds crazy, but it's like, I put so much into like this person that I wanted to be that I thought was healthy. And it was like the unhealthiest situation for myself. So when I was finally like, you know what, we're young, we don't have any children together, we can cut ties romantically and still have a friendship. I was like, bingo, you can fail at this, or you can exit this relationship and not fail. Like, I don't think my marriage was a failure. I had a 5-year successful relationship because after 5 years, I realized, you know what? I'm not happy. He's not happy. So then I'm like, well, how do I transform that into actually being like the way I connect to my community? And so when I did that, and I was very open about the divorce, because I was like, I had a very public relationship. So in true Carmelita fashion, I was like, I'm going to have a very public breakup as well.
Keep it on brand, right?
Gotta stay on brand. And so then I was like, after that, then I can, enter the world of like picking and choosing my privacy. So it's like, I made this post, what was it, in 2017? And it was like me smiling real big. And I was like, I'm leaving my marriage in 2017. And people were like, what? And so it was like, I broke my personal internet because people are like, so I cut off the comments because I was tired of hearing like, oh no, I'm sorry. And people wanted to apologize. And I'm like, don't apologize to anything. Don't be sorry. I chose to leave because I was seeking my own peace, And so when I realized like, at that point, that was the biggest, quote unquote, like fuck up or failure. I was like, wait a minute, if I can survive this, like, and then afterwards, I have had like the last, 3 going on 4 years have been so beautiful for me because it's been just me. Like, I think I've lived an amazing adulthood. Like my childhood, pretty freaking crappy, but I've had such an amazing adulthood, and every year keeps getting better because I have people that, I'm really close with that hold me accountable, people who support me, people who are like very patient and like just gracious with me, because there is still an air of me that is like clinging to naivete and this like magical fairy wonderland of like, everybody, should be nice and loving. And that shit just isn't reality. Like every time I kind of get screwed over, I'm like, but what are they going through to make them want to do this horrible? And sometimes people just suck. Sometimes people are selfish and it's not some like deeper, whatever. But when I was able to like kind of tap into more of like, where is my home frequency? Like that's a term that I picked up from, what was it? The Friend Zone podcast. I think Miriam Hasna. Are you familiar with her?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So she introduced me to the idea of like, what is your home frequency? And so when I was like, wait a minute, my home frequency is peace. And I didn't have peace in my relationship. Like my home frequency is stillness. It is resting. So people like, they always joke and be like, all you do is sleep. And I'm like, because if I sleep, I can show up as my very best self. And right now, especially being a single person who has no large responsibilities like children or like a partner, like all these things, like I am my responsibility. And so I am going to sleep as much as my body allows me to, because in the moments that I have to like, be a part of the like machine and run and gun and do, I will have the energy to do so because I've taken care of myself. So
I shaded that. Thank you for taking us on that journey and telling us, just a little bit about your story and the way that you're utilizing media, right, to kind of confront some of the stereotypes that people want to put on you, right? Absolutely. And that thread of authenticity is just like hella powerful. And I think that the fact that you ran to that in the sense of like, this is this is me living, right? If I can't be my real self, I don't want to be that. So
Yeah.
I remember you walked across the world, right? Didn't you do something where
I did.
what is that called, and what did you do, and how was that experience? Because that blog was amazing as well.
I didn't walk across the world per se, just Western Spain. I went on
The world.
I went on a pilgrimage in 2018, and it's called the Camino de Santiago. I honestly went because one of my homegirls from high school, and mind you, I hadn't talked to her since we graduated. Like, we kind of like split ways, and like, when people graduate from high school, you're not around each other. You don't have, the same relationship that you had. But she hit me up and she was just like, I love how you're living your life. Like, how do you pursue being a creative and also like, take care of yourself? And I was flabbergasted because I was like, is that what you see me doing? Because I am literally out here just winging it. Like, I had literally just left my husband. And when I left him, like, there was no way we could live in the same house. And so I kicked him out of the apartment because we had like, I didn't want to be in a bickering, like have any type of negativity or whatever. So I was like, all right, I love you, but you have to move out. I didn't have a job. Wasn't getting unemployment. Like, I had just got fired a month prior. And so it was like, I had nothing. So I started from scratch. And so for her to say like, you're figuring out how to like monetize your creative. And I'm like, I write a couple essays every once in a while and like hope to get published, but like, I'm not making money from this. So she says this and I'm like, is this really how you view my life? And she's like, I work in a prison. Like, I don't have a window. And you're like out here, like literally being able to write. And while you're nannying, like we literally lived complete opposite lives for the last, 5 years. And so she was like high security prison. She was a therapist. And so I'm like, I work with kids all day and I get to like hang out. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed my work as a nanny. And so when I gave up my marriage and all these things, she was like, I'm going to go on this trip because I need to take a break from this job that I hate. And it's a very, difficult and traumatic for me at times. And I'm going to go backpacking through Western Spain. And I was like, okay, so who are you going with? She was like, nobody. And I was like, the hell you're walking through Western Spain alone? And so I was like, I'm going too. I had no idea what it meant to backpack through Europe. Like, I'm not super high maintenance, but I'm like a tomboy who still likes to like wear glitter and have like a full set and my hair done. But like, it's like, there's like a juxtaposition of like my masculine and feminine energies. Like, my brother and we're literally like the same person, but opposites. And he's like, how are you such a nigga? And I'm like, I don't know. I got all the little boy stuff that you didn't get. Like, he is like hella bougie and first class prissy. Like,
that's funny.
Like, he has a standing nail appointment now. And I'm like, just kind of rough and tumble. But it's like, I'm still not someone that's going to be like, let me go camping outside. Fuck that shit. I'm not going to do it. So when she said backpacking through Spain, I agreed to go with the very least amount of information possible, because I feel like with an outpouring of a lot of information for me, sometimes I will just not do it. Fear will kick in. I'll start asking too many questions. Where am I using the bathroom? Where am I sleeping? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm going to buy my ticket. And then you can give me all the information I need necessary a month before we go. Because if you give it to me now, I'm going to talk myself out of it. So literally, like right before the trip, I got my backpack, I got my little water canteen thing, I got my hiking shoes, and I didn't like research the Camino. I did absolutely no research because I was like, I have to go through this body first or I'm not going to do it. Like, I didn't have a passport, all these things, but like literally it was like, never went out of the country before. Now I'm going to walk through a foreign country for 35 days.
Wow. So that was your first time leaving?
Yep, that was my first time, my first stamp.
Wow. I had no idea. This is dope. This is dope. So from that experience, right? Because you were like now writing on an international level, do you feel like that enhanced your brand and took it to a next level?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it speaks to like a fearlessness and also the like jumping in part, but then also I made the choice while I was there. Like, I made sure I brought my laptop with me because I'm like, I want to write through this experience. I want to share this experience with people because I want them to know that like, I didn't think this was accessible for me. Like, the lifestyle that I'm living, like literally for 35 days, every day we woke up and we were like, what are we going to do today? And it's like, walk as far as we can. That was our only intention. And to do the trip, most people like want to do the entire, I think it's a 400 or 500 mile journey. We didn't walk the whole thing. Like we took a train a couple of times and like a bus once. And so like, but we walked a great deal of it for 35 days, but it was like, I'm not going to beat my body up or my feet. So as far as my body takes me today, that's how far I'll go. And like, I'll write about it. But I also thought like, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to like blog every day. But then I realized if I'm walking 7 to 17 miles every day, I'm not going to have the energy to like write all the things and do all the things. Like I thought I was going to like, you know, do so much more than I did. But what I did do was like a lot of internal work. And so that's also where I like discovered that I had no idea how to love myself. And so I don't think that that is something that I could have done and then also be working on my creative or working as a writer. Like I didn't have the space, like mental or emotional, to like do those things. And so I'm walking across wherever and I'm like, oh snap, how am I expecting romantic partners to love me when I have no idea what it means to love myself? So I reached out to my therapist. I sent her an email when we got Wi-Fi, wherever we were. And I was like, I don't know how to love me. And so she was just like, you get to decide what that means to you every day. So figure it out, write it down, and then you decide what love is for you or what it means to love yourself. And so I'm like walking every day and I'm like, well, what does it mean? How do I feel when I'm loved? What does it mean for me to love myself? And so sometimes it was like, loving myself today means I'm going to make sure I get enough water intake, or it means I'm going to be patient with myself when I don't walk as far as I thought I was going to, or I'm going to like whatever. And so doing that trip and then also having this like, you know, whole otherworldly like internal realization, like being able to carry that with me as, you know, a creative when I'm back in the real world, because unless I go backpacking again, there probably won't be a situation in which I'm like, let me just wander around, you know, and every day just figure out where I'm sleeping or what I'm going to eat kind of thing. But it's like, as a creative, I'm like, how can I live my best life today? Like I have long-term goals and all these things, but like when walking and you have nothing else to do but to get to your destination, like there were times where we were literally like in the forest and you can't turn around and go back. You have to keep going forward. We're literally like trees and trees and trees and like in the middle of like cow fields and horse, like all these things. There was no turning back. So it's like, all right, where am I today? How can I move forward? Whether it's writing, sending a text message. Sometimes all I can do today is send one email. Other times it's like, I'm going to write an essay. Like I wrote an essay today in the 3.5 hour flight from LA to Houston. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have all these feels. And sometimes it takes me like a couple of weeks to edit an essay, but I was like, this essay is like one edit away from like being able to publish it. But I think it's because, you know, I intentionally go about, whether it's my creative or like traveling or like whatever, I'm like, all right, what can we do today? And just leave it at today. So
doing that healing work all the time, right? Like every day, it's a consistent process. This is just beautiful to hear your journey and hear your story. So thank you so much for sharing it with the folks here. I hope y'all taking notes, right, on how you can not only utilize media, right, for the likes or for the money, but right, to really share your story and to do some internal processing to figure out how to live an incredible life. So this is it. This is the key. This is the key. So let's talk about this pink couch, because I see you got this big old pink couch and you on YouTube, you're a celebrity now. What made you come up with that idea and why did you decide to utilize, you know, YouTube as far as a platform?
So pink is my favorite color. And I had this vision when I was living in Los Angeles that I wanted to have this bright, airy room, like living room with this like a magenta couch. Like I had never seen it. And so I started to like Google and Pinterest, like what would it look like to have pink accents? But, you know, growing up, like I was told like I can't have like the pink Barbie furniture. And I'm like, why not? So in high school, all I did was wear like bright neon colors. And so the adults around me would be like, well, by the time you grow up, you're going to, you know, grow out of that. And so being a 30-year-old woman, I was like, this is my first apartment. So when I moved to Houston, I, you know, got my first apartment by myself. And so I'm like, I want this to be like everywhere I turn is going to be like just the essence of me. And I'm like, a bright pink couch is like, it's what I want. And so when I was traveling across the country before moving, I wanted to do brunch conversations with Carmalita, because from having like conversations on like Facebook or Instagram where people were like, how did you do this? Or like, how did you find the courage to leave your husband? Or like, I was getting like an influx of DMs about my experiences and people being like, oh, I love what you're doing. How can I, tap into that? So I was like, I just put out a post like, if I did like a brunch conversation and invited everybody out, would you guys come? And then I would share my experiences with you and how I live this fearless life and blah, 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 blah. And so I didn't ever end up doing the brunch conversations just because like life. And I realized like having an actual event takes more into it than like, oh, I want people to show up. It's like, oh, caterers, an event, like all the planning stuff that I don't love, it kind of like overwhelmed me. And so I never did anything with that idea. So when I got my couch, I was like, yo, what if I were to sit here and have a conversation on my pink couch, and then I live for an alliteration. So I was just like, couch conversations with Carmalita, and it's pink. So it's like, that's a hit for me at least. And so I get this pink couch and I'm like, I want to share not only my story, but other people's stories. Like I'm just really big on like how people can connect. And so anytime I got like an idea or there was like a topic in like, current culture, I'm like, I want to talk to someone about this. And so one of my favorite interviews was me talking to a mom of 4 about the song WAP. And so she's a mother with 2 sets of twins, 3 girls and 1 boy. And so I'm like, you're raising 3, as far as well, you're identifying them as girls, but you are going to be raising young women. So how are you going to approach that when there are conversations about like songs that say like wet ass pussy and and women who are like owning their sexuality? And so, and I had no idea like what her response was and what her experience was. And she was like, listen, when I was a kid, this is how my mom approached talking about sex or talking about self and like your pleasure. And she's like, you have a man for, what did she call? Dang, I think it was Colladix. And I was like,
oh, wow.
Yes. I was like, from her mother as a teen. And she was like, I had Colladix. I will call a dick for this. She was like, sometimes I'd have sex with them. Sometimes I wouldn't. If I wanted someone to like take me to dinner, I'd have them take me to dinner and it would be strictly platonic. If I wanted someone to this and this. And so she's like, that was her, like her rearing. Meanwhile, I'm like, the woman that adopted me was like literally the spawn of Satan. And I asked her about sex and she's like, if you want to go and be a little whore, go ahead. And I was like, okay, we can't have it. And I wasn't interested in having sex when my friends were having sex. And I'm like, I should be talking to an adult about this. And so and she was an older woman and she was just a horrible, person in general. But like, that was her response. If you want to talk about sex, it must mean you're a whore. So like, and my 16-year-old self was like, noted, can't talk to like this, adult about it. So to hear someone say, I was raised with my mom saying like, own yourself, own your body, own your sexuality, make your pleasure a priority. I was like, you're going to raise your children, both sons and daughters, to, have this certain, mindset, or at least encourage this mindset that that I had never like heard of before. So that's my favorite thing about my couch conversations, whether it's just me talking to the camera or me having a conversation with someone else. It's like, how can I connect to other people and learn other people and tell their stories? And it's also a way for me to be able to tell people stories without like ghost writing or writing an essay or like, all that goes into being a writer. And sometimes that can be exhausting and it's like very taxing. But if I'm having a 30-minute conversation with someone and they're able to tell their own story in a way that I don't have to like edit it or do all these things, I'm like, this is it for me. Like, this is a part of my, my favorite part of being a creative or being a writer is like, it's storytelling. Like, that's all I want to do. Well, not all I want to do, but one of the things I want to do is tell stories. So when I invite people to my couch, I'm like, listen, we're just kicking it. We're homegirls. Like, tell me like, let's talk about this. And so it's one of my favorite projects that I'm doing. I want to like, extend it to beyond my couch because I kind of have a cool bed too. And so my brother suggested I have like conversations in my bed because I have this like pretty unique headboard that I made and it's just all open books. And so I'm going to be inviting people into my bed as well to just talk about like intimacy and like what better way to get intimate with someone than inviting them into your bed in a non-sexual way. So I'm really just interested in like, just the art of storytelling, whether it's on my pink couch or, in a blog, an essay, a book, whatever.
Oh, so the pink couch, this is an interesting story that you love pink, you got it. Now you're taking them into your bedroom. So you're
Yeah.
just making your own reality TV show. I see what
I
you
just,
got going on.
yes. I want to do all the things. Like I
Mhm.
want people to connect in ways that and have conversations that even if we're having them with like our homies. We're not having them with like the larger collective. Like we can talk on days end about whatever. But it's like, okay, well, let's talk about some real stuff. Like I had an episode about the grief that I experienced after my grandmother passed last year. And she was my father's mother, who I don't have a relationship with either, but she's German. And so like she literally survived, like she grew up hearing like the sounds of World War II bombs and things. And then she has like 6 little Black children brought back to the States with her. And she's having to raise like she has this amazing story. And I felt so much grief after she passed because I'm like, that's a part of my life I don't know, I'm not connected with because I was adopted. But I felt this overwhelming sense of grief. And I'm like, I want to talk to people about this because if we can talk about dating and sex and, WAP and shit, we can also talk about grief and like suicide. Like I've, spoken before about someone who has struggled with like suicidal ideations or attempted suicide. And it is something that many people are struggling with. And so it happened to also be Suicide Prevention Month. So I had an episode about grief and like what happens when people have these overwhelming feelings or experiences and like what to do with it, and that there are resources and there are people, like no matter if you think you have no friends, like there is literally someone willing to listen to you, because people much rather listen to whatever you're going through than to have to show up at your funeral. And so I think it's just really important to like tap into that when I'm on my pink couch or wherever. Like we can talk about some real shit, but we can also talk about like fun stuff and current events, like whatever is going on. I want people to have the openness to be able to have these discussions with me.
Nice. So you've lived in quite a few places. Out of all the places you've lived, what's your top place? What's your favorite?
My favorite place, I think hands down, Los Angeles. Like I just spent 2 weeks there, and even though I was like, hella quarantined, yeah, I know, person after your own heart, but it's like I love LA so much. And so when people hear that, like whether it's a transplant or whomever, all people want to talk about are like the negative connotations that come along with the idea of Los Angeles. Kind of like the idea of social media or like putting on for Instagram, like pre-Instagram, it's like you think Hollywood. And then you get to Hollywood and you realize like the only people that go to Hollywood are people who are visiting. Like Hollywood, like I thought when I visited LA the first time, I think it was like 16 or 17, my brother took me, and I thought Hollywood was literally going to be like plated in gold on the ground. There were going to be celebrities everywhere. And I'm like, this is Hollywood. And he took me. And the first thing I saw when I got off the train was a homeless person. I was
the reality is there, right there.
And so I feel that way about like just the essence of anytime someone is putting themselves out there. Like, and so when you're in Los Angeles, when people say their experience is like, oh, like, of course, LA is expensive. We all know this, which is why I'm still in Texas. Like, I'm like, maybe I could be here for another year, especially since, COVID has shut the world down. But it's like outside of it being expensive, there are so many gems that I love about Los Angeles that have absolutely nothing to do with like bright and shiny. Like, I love that in the city, you have literally, you can go hiking, you can go to the beach a 30-minute drive away, you can just like be in nature, you can go to a forest if you want to drive. Like there is so much outside you can do. That's why I love LA, like being able to go hiking or go on a walk. And like, of course, the weather is my favorite. Texas has pretty decent weather too. I can't complain about having 65-degree like Januaries where I grew up and it's a blizzard every year, January, February, right? So it's like LA is my favorite because it's like, it's always been home for me. I think mainly because my brother, he was like the one who like led the way for me. He hopped in his car at 19 and drove from Ohio to Los Angeles with $20.
Wow.
He got
How did he
stuck.
get there on $20? He must have got some love on the way.
Well, first of all, gas was like 11 cents back in 2003 or whatever. So like
True.
gas was like 80, like $1, So it was like, there was that, but then also like he got stuck and, family had to wire him some money. But when he left, he was like, I can't do this Ohio shit anymore. Like it was too small for him. He's just like, we were talking when I was just there and he's like, I can't move anywhere where I can't be comfortable being myself. It's like, he's like, I don't like going into the South and having to worry about if I can wear a particular thing. Or he's like, I want to be able to like have my nails done and like wear a long kimono and have a long braid down my ass and not have people staring at me crazy or like saying anything about him because he's gay, because in some small areas it's still a thing, which is asinine to me. But it's like people that are not able to just show up as themselves. It's, I feel like LA generally, like there's a whole, what is it called? Like the melting pot. It kind of like welcomes everybody, and water always finds its level. So if you want like the athletes, you'll find them. If you want to go to WeHo and be in Boys Town, like you have that. If you want to be with all the nature hippies, they're that, the stoners, whomever. Like, I feel like in LA, there's literally all of that in the city. Like, I don't know many other cities where you have so many different types of folk and you're able to like, freely maneuver a city and not feel like, an outcast or like you have to like keep up with people. Like when people say like, oh, LA is like pompous or snooty, I'm like, if you have a bad experience in Los Angeles, that might be because the energy you're putting out is not the best. Like I have, been around celebrities and like in mansion parties and all these things and it not been like a thing. Not to say when I first got there, I wasn't like bright-eyed, like, wow, people live in houses like these. But being a professional nanny, like I literally was in like some houses, let me tell you, like
houses.
Like people like wanting to name drop and all these things. Like I was literally like, and I am going to name drop because it's amazing. Like I saw Blue Ivy every other day. Like my kids went to school with Beyonce's daughter. So I'm like, I was able to like kind of rub elbows with people, but then see them in like a different light. Like celebrities are real people too. The only thing is people just like more people know who you are than they know who I am. It's not, I think Oprah said it. She was like, the only thing difference between you and I, it's like, I'm not special or like anything. It's just that more people know who I am. And so LA is my favorite because I'm like, I've seen it all from like people who are like living in poverty to people who are like freaking billionaires. And I'm like, in every level of wherever people are, it's like you will find like what you gravitate towards. So if you gravitate towards like bougie, I'm finna get flued out type stuff, then it's like that may be, your stilo, which is cool. Everybody has their thing. But my experience has been like, I've come in contact with so many like beautiful and genuine and just like wholehearted ass people, you being one of them. It's like, Los Angeles has just been amazing. And that's not to say that like being in Houston, it hasn't been the same thing, but like LA just feels more home than anywhere else in the world does to me.
Dope. You just gave so much love to my city.
I love it so much. I mean, I've been going there since I was a kid. Like 3 generations of my family have moved to Los Angeles after they graduated high school. Like my granny's sister, like literally most of my biological family have migrated there. So all I knew was small town Ohio and Los Angeles. So I'm like, I have no choice but to show the city love.
Exactly. Y'all better know if you haven't taken a trip, if you haven't been, if you're out of the US, because we got some listeners that are around the world, make sure you get to Los Angeles as soon as possible and check it out.
Your people are absolutely there. Well, I feel like you can probably find your people anywhere, but it's like, there's so much in the city. Like even during like I spent November in Los Angeles and then I just spent a couple of weeks there and people were like, well, what were you able to do because it's COVID? And I'm like, I did the same stuff now that I used to do when I lived in LA. I'm going to take my behind hiking. I'm going to go to the beach. Like I am master social distancer. Like as much as I love to be around people, I'm also very reclusive. So I'm like, okay, yeah, bars and restaurants and things are closed, but you can be outside. Like where the air is, it's okay. So for me, I'm like, LA still lit. Like I went to the beach like 2 days in a row when I went there because it was just like beautiful. Like just being able to watch the sunset, like that is like, you can't put a price tag on that. Being in the ocean, touching like the vast body of water that's just like looks limitless. Like for me, that is so much more valuable than like being able to dine in a restaurant or like go to a nightclub or like, and the last bookstore was open. So I was still able to like take home a ton of books with me. So like, I was good. I had a great time.
Nice, nice, nice. So you will go back. That I'm assuming that is true. That's true for you. You'll be back after the COVID. I want to be recognize your time because you are a celebrity now and all famous. So we gotta get you off of here. But before you go, can you please let folks know how can they support your work? How can they connect with you? How can they watch more of the pink conversations on the pink couch with you? What are the best ways?
So if you really want to really get to know me, you can follow me on Instagram because I live in my Insta story. It's home. I share hella memes. You're going to find anything from mental health to sex positivity to stuff about children and frying chicken. It's just a whole lovely world of the internet's there for me. So my Instagram handle and Twitter, but I'm rarely there, is Carmafornia, Carmafornia, because I'm Cali girl at heart. And then you can also follow me or subscribe to my YouTube channel at the Convivial Space. And so the Convivial Space is my general brand. The Convivial Space, my happy place, which is I love the word convivial because I think it just describes the essence of me, just jubilant and happy and a party, on the inside. That's how I feel. So my pink couch conversations are found on Convivial Space, my happy place, or you can also just type in pink couch conversations with Carmalita, Carmalita. You can find me there. I have a couple of essays published online. What else? I also have a couple of interesting things coming to Instagram. So it's kind of a big deal. I can't quite talk about it yet because actually I have 2 days to talk about it. When are you going to air this? Because I might be able to talk about it.
It's going to air in February.
Oh, fabulous. So, okay. I have some good news to share. I recently entered a Put Yourself Out There challenge. Tinder, the dating app, they encourage single people to put themselves out there. And so Meg Thee Stallion was one of the people who were hey, hot girls, put yourself out there. So I submitted a video to put myself out there as a single girl, and they were giving out $10,000 to 100 lucky singles. And I was one of the finalists.
Woo!
So I won. So in 2 days, they're going to blast us. I am potentially maybe on a billboard if they choose my video, because we had to submit some more things. So that's exciting news coming up. So you're going to see a tad bit more of me if you're in the LA area and they put my face on a billboard. So that's some exciting stuff. You can find me there. I think Instagram right now is my main hub. It has all my links there on my, in my bio.
Nice, nice. So we'll be sure to put that in the show notes as well so that folks can check it out and click it and be able to engage, follow, subscribe, go read an essay, get into the work because this person is amazing and doing incredible work and will continue to do that. So get on there, get into it. Are you still selling those hats? Do you still have merch for the brand as well?
No, I took a break from because that's a lot of freaking work. And
definitely.
I can't at the present moment, I have put it on pause. So all of my merchandise is just going to be it's going to happen when I can do so in a peaceful way to my heart. So no hats quite anymore, but when the time is right, I will have my merch available again. My name is Carmalita and I am born obviously incredible.
Thanks for listening to Boy Meets Wellness. Stay connected on and off the show by following us online at Boy Meets Wellness. That's boy with an I. Until next time, go